This man had his arm bitten off by a monster, but he didn't care at all. The reason was simple: all the monsters were afraid of him. His flesh had an extraordinary regenerative ability, and his body was incredibly agile. The monsters were terrified of him. In reality, Koro was a kind, gentle college student. To everyone, he appeared like the typical cheerful, optimistic young man with a simple, happy life. But behind this facade, he harbored a secret no one knew. Years ago, when Koro was just a child, his family's head forced the younger generation to eat the flesh of mermaids and prophetic beasts, hoping to create beings who could not die and had the ability to foresee the future. They believed that if they could freely predict the future, they would gain endless wealth and power. However, most of the family members died because their bodies couldn't handle the strain, and their experiments failed. That was until Koro was 11 years old. He witnessed his brothers die from internal bleeding at the dinner table, their bodies hemorrhaging violently. Koro, still naive, sought help from his grandmother, who had always been kind to him. But when she saw that Koro was unharmed, she became strangely excited. Without warning, she grabbed a knife. She wanted to test Kuro's abilities. Each time Koro died, he could see glimpses of his future. As his grandmother tortured him repeatedly, Koro slowly lost his ability to feel pain. His power manifested differently from what the family expected. Koro could only predict the future through his death. He became something between human and non-human. For years, Koro thought no one would ever understand him. He kept his secret to himself, until one day, he met a girl named Kotoko, who could see monsters. Kotoko had liked Koro for 2 years, but back then, Koro had a girlfriend. So, Kotoko kept her feelings to herself. When she found out Koro and his girlfriend, Saki, had broken up, she decided to approach him. Kotoko asked Koro if he would date her with marriage as a possibility. However, Koro seemed to be hiding something and wasn't interested in relationships anymore. Under Kotoko's persistent questioning, Koro finally confessed why he and Saki broke up. One day, Koro and Saki were walking by a river when a terrifying creature, a kappa, suddenly appeared from the water. Koro thought it looked like a kappa, but when Saki saw it, she was so scared that she clung to Koro. Koro, also terrified, left Saki behind and fled. Saki, feeling abandoned, grew resentful, thinking Koro was selfish. Their relationship became strained, and eventually, Saki used her job relocation as an excuse to break up with him. Kotoko understood Kuro's behavior, but Koro blamed himself. He stood up to leave. Kotoko insisted on knowing who really ran away. Koro tried to avoid the question, but Kotoko believed the kappa, not Koro, was the one who fled. She argued that if a monster that terrifying ran away from Koro, then Koro must be something more than human. Koro was deeply affected by Kotoko's words, but he insisted he had lied. There were no kappas, he claimed, but Kotoko insisted she had seen kappas, and they were actually quite cute. She said there were many such creatures in the world, all of whom warned her to stay away from Koro because he was dangerous. Koro, curious, asked Kotoko who she was and why she believed in these monsters. To his surprise, Kotoko shared her own story, how she became a god of the monsters. Years ago, she was taken by the monster spirits, who begged her to become their god of wisdom. She agreed, but at a great cost. Her right eye was gouged out, and one of her legs was broken. Despite the rough nature of her injuries, they healed after being treated with acidic substances. Kotoko had lost an eye and a leg, but she knew this was the price of becoming a god. Koro couldn't believe her story, but Kotoko told him that if he didn't believe her, he could look up a newspaper report from 6 years ago, about a missing 5th grade girl. The girl had her left leg severed and her right eye gouged out. Before Koro could respond, Kotoko boarded a bus and prepared to leave. However, no one noticed that there was a monster sitting on the roof of the bus.